Learn Japanese history.
We are your navigators, Taro and Hanako.
Welcome. So you're diving into Japanese history with us, and today we're really going to get into the world of the Bushi, the warrior class.
Hmm.
We're focusing on, well, how their communities were actually put together, their daily life, how things worked on the ground level.
Exactly. Think of it like the foundations. We'll look at their homes, how they handled land, their training.
And the social glue holding them together.
Right, all those basic building blocks of their society. It's fundamental stuff.
Okay, so let's start with the basics. Where did these warriors actually, live? The residence, the Yakata, seems key.
It absolutely was. And their location wasn't random. Often you'd find them with, say, hills or mountains behind them.
For protection.
Yeah, natural defense. And then fields stretching out in front, essential for survival for their economy. That link to the land was, well, it defined them in many ways.
Makes sense. And these yakatas, they weren't just houses, were they? I read about moats, ditches.
Right, often fed by small rivers nearby. Another layer of defense. And then the land around them, that system was quite interesting.
How so?
Well, you had the land they managed directly, the jike,
Kiche, okay.
and the harvest from that land. It belonged entirely to the warrior.
Ah, so that was their direct income, cultivated by farmers tied to them.
Exactly. Subordinate farmers, sometimes called sakuko or moribito, they worked that core land. This direct control, this jike, gave them that stable economic base.
Which let them build up military strength.
Precisely. And then beyond the jike, you had fields belonging to other farmers.
The Myoshu and Haihosho, their relationship was a bit different, wasn't it?
Uh-huh. Less direct control, but still obligations. They'd pay dues, maybe vegetables, provide labor.
So like a structured hierarchy.
You could see it like that, yeah. A kind of pyramid. The directly controlled farmers, then the more independent ones still contributing to the Yakata lord.
Got it. So let's step inside the Yakata itself. It wasn't just a family home,
Not at all. You had the main building, the Omoya, for the lord's family, sure.
but also places for retainers. The Tozamurai.
Right, a waiting area for them. It points to this whole community functioning together within those walls.
Like a command center.
Absolutely, the nerve center. And packed with military stuff. Stables, obviously, watchtowers.
And training grounds, the Baba.
Exactly. It was built for a warrior's life, multifunctional.
The real heart of their operation.
Ah.
Storing armor, swords, bows.
All the essential gear. And the training there was constant. Mounted archery, like Kaskoge.
And that dog chasing thing?
Yeah.
In Wumino. That sounds intense.
It does. But these weren't just games. Kasagaki hitting a target from horseback, that's direct combat skill.
Okay, that makes sense. Aiming while moving.
Apparently, it started from using a hat, a kasa, as a target. There's a reference in the Fukurazoshi Imaki.
Interesting origin. But the dog chasing, how did that help?
Well, it's debated, but likely it developed horsemanship, maybe target acquisition in a chaotic setting, quick reflexes.
Okay. I can sort of see that. So this whole lifestyle, centered on the Yakata, the training, it forged a specific mindset.
Right, definitely. A code of conduct started to emerge, valuing honor, being fearless about death. The way of the warrior, Yumiya no Narai.
The way of the bow and arrow.
Literally, yeah. That honor, that martial skill, it was core to their identity.
Right.
And when the call came from their lord,
They mobilize fast.
very fast. Often the whole family unit would go into battle together. It showed incredible commitment.
That image of Iza Kamakura, now to Kamakura, warriors riding hard from the east. It suggests a really efficient system.
It does. Loyalty plus good roads like the Kamakura Kaido made that possible. And for the warriors, the basic fighting unit. It was the family, the lineage.
So the social structure was the military structure, in a way.
Very much intertwined. And leading them was the Soryo.
The head of the family, the lineage head or Kotoku.
Right. He led his brothers, junior family members, in war. Huge authority.
And those junior members, they could branch out eventually.
Uh-huh. They'd established their own lines, creating this wider kinship network. It really strengthened the whole warrior class structure.
And they even built temples together
Yeah.
as an extended family.
Yes. To really cement those bonds, pledging unity, finding a spiritual anchor when facing constant danger.
That makes sense. It shows a really deep shared identity.
It does. And this whole system centered on family and lineage ties. That's what we call the Soryo-sei.
The Soryo-sei. Okay, It sounds foundational.
It had a huge lasting impact, definitely.
Now, these warrior bands, they didn't just exist in isolation, did they? They must have interacted with other groups like them.
Oh, absolutely. Not just on the battlefield either. They do joint training.
Like what?
Big hunting expeditions, makigari,
Yeah.
or swimming exercises, surin.
Ah, so that built relationships.
For sure. Fostered connections often led to marriages between families. It helped weave alliances together.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit and talk about women in these warrior communities. It seems their status was actually surprisingly high, at least initially.
That's a fair assessment, yeah. Especially regarding property. Many women could inherit land, sometimes equally.
Which gave them economic independence.
The good degree of it, yes. And that meant social influence, too.
But that started to change, especially if a woman married into another family line.
Right. The issue was her land could potentially leave her birth lineage. So later in the Kamakura period, you see this practice called Ichigo-bun emerging.
Ichigo-bun. What did that do?
Basically, it meant that the land she inherited would only be hers for her lifetime. After her death, it went back to her original family line.
Ah, so it limited her long-term control and kept the land within the lineage.
Exactly. And that, over time, did contribute to a gradual decline in women's independent power over land.
Still, even with those changes, it sounds like women were very present in society. There are mentions in writings, like Nichiren.
Yeah, suggesting a significant female population. Hard to get exact numbers, of course, but they were visible, active participants.
And religiously active, too.
Definitely. We see inscriptions showing women donating for Buddhist statues. And the newer forms of Kamakura Buddhism seem to have really appealed to women you see that depicted in things like the Ippon Shonen Eden.
Interesting. What about how they were named? Wasn't like the men.
Generally, no. They often used childhood names, daimyo, or common names, susho. Formal adult names were less common, unless maybe you were a court lady with rank.
And in legal documents, like land deeds.
They'd usually be identified by their clan name, followed by woman, like clan name woman, and importantly, they kept their father's clan name after marriage.
Showing that lineage identity remains strong.
It did. Though after marriage, of course, they developed strong ties to the new household children, managing the home.
Which could lead to some dependence.
It could, naturally. But, and this is key, any land she had inherited, that remained her independent property.
So that gave her security a strong position as wife and mother.
Absolutely. It grounded her position within that household structure.
And could women ever represent the household? Say, if the husband died young?
Yes, there are cases. Women stepping in, allocating land for farming, even settling disputes. They could act for the family unit.
Okay, that's a really nuanced picture. Now let's look at how these warriors interacted with the older power structures, the big estate owners.
Right. The warriors often served as local managers, basically. As hito, local governors appointed by the shogunate, or as shokan, officials for the private estates, the shuin.
And their job was to oversee things locally, collect taxes from peasants.
And then, theoretically, deliver that revenue to the estate owners.
But the owners weren't usually living there, were they?
No, typically they were miles away, in Kyoto or Nara. The warriors were on the ground, in the manors.
And distance creates opportunity.
Exactly. That separation was crucial. Power slowly, steadily shifted to the local warriors, especially the hito who had the shogunate's backing.
And they weren't always playing fair, were they? They found ways to increase their own take.
Let's just say they looked after their own interests. Cultivating new fields for themselves, maybe underreporting harvests due to bad weather, things like that.
Which must have caused friction with the absentee owners.
Big time. Lots of disputes ended up in the shogunate's courts.
Did the owners usually win in court?
Often, yes, the legal right was still with the owners, but going to court was expensive, took ages.
So people looked for workarounds.
Precisely. Practical solutions emerged. One was jidoyuk.
Jidoyuk.
Yeah, where the estate owner basically said, okay, Yido, you manage the whole estate, just guarantee me a fixed payment each year.
So the owner gets predictable income, but the Yido gets control on the ground.
That's the trade-off. Another arrangement was shitai jichibun.
It sounds more drastic.
It was. It involved physically dividing the manor's land.
Splitting it between the owner and the Hito.
Exactly. Fields, forests, pastures, literally drawing lines on a map. This part for the owner, Rokbun. This part for the Edo.
Wow. That's a huge shift away from the old Shuin system.
Yeah.
Formal recognition of the warrior's power.
A massive step.
Yeah.
There's actually a famous mid-13th century map of Togo Manor in Hoki province that shows this clearly.
You can see the divided sections.
Yep. And importantly, it has the official authentication marks. The Kaito of the shogunal regent, the shikin, and the cosigner, the rensho.
So the shogunate itself was signing off on these divisions.
Absolutely. It shows just how much direct control the Hito were gaining over the land and resources with official backing. It really illustrates the changing power dynamics.
So that gives us a much clearer picture. We've seen the warriors' world from their homes, the Yakata, to the family bonds of the Soryosei, and how they interacted with and eventually started to take over the older estate system.
It's a complex tapestry, isn't it? And what's really fascinating is seeing how these local structures, these ways of life, they really set the stage for much bigger changes in Japanese power and culture down the line.
Yeah, that constant pressure, needing defense, needing food from the land,
Yeah.
it shaped everything about their daily existence.
He really did.
And we've only really scratched the surface here. As you continue exploring Japanese history, think about how this kind of local power, these tight-knit warrior groups, how did that eventually scale up?
Right. What kind of leadership, what values came out of that specific environment? That's something really interesting to ponder as you go deeper.